Hello and welcome to Three in Harmony and a continuation of our chat with Andy Lumsden, a distinguished church musician, and we're finding out a little bit more about his distinguished career and particularly the dross behind the gloss.
It's such a good line, it's such a good line.
So, Andy, we got to the end of your 3 years, 3.5 years.
3.5 years at Westminster Abbey.
At Westminster Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit more about that and about particularly, some of the special services that you did. And
We had lots and lots of special services, mentioned in the previous programme, two of the really big ones. But it was always, the organ I absolutely loved for accompanying on, because you could use so much of it. And the amazing colours you have there is quite extraordinary. And I think we've been told several times that the disc of Psalms, the 2 discs of Psalms that we did was very good, that was just showing off the organ really, because it had all these extraordinary sounds, and just working there day by day, it had its frustrations, of course, because the pressures on the building were extraordinary, and if we had a big service, it would be shut for a day or two, and you would have to not be able to practice the organ because if it was televised, you having the equipment put in and all that sort of thing. But it was still, the dean there was a wonderful man called Michael Main, who'd been at Great St Mary's in Cambridge. And he was desperate to get it into a place of, I say desperate, he really wanted to get it into a place of being a real church, not just the national church for big occasions, which it was always extremely good at doing, very well-oiled machine, but also a real church for the daily worshipper. And of course, you get tourists galore through there, most of whom who don't know the one end of the song from the other, but you could almost always guarantee that they would have gone away with something because of the welcome that they were given, and just this, he just wanted it to have this thing, and the regular congregation started building as we were going along, because which was good, because it's not in a particularly residential part of town. Yes, there obviously is, but quite a lot of people live closely and probably go out to the country for the weekends. So he did a remarkable job in trying to building that up.
It always felt to me as though it had a real collegiate sort of atmosphere, which is slightly different from St Paul's in that respect. I guess that was partly because of the nature of the building with the screen and all of that sort of thing, but also the fact that you all lived in little cloister together.
Absolutely.
It had a real collegiate atmosphere.
It is, and indeed it's called the Collegiate Church of St Peter in Westminster. So that was a thing. And of course, being a royal peculiar, it obviously is Anglican, but it doesn't have, the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't have any jurisdiction over it. And indeed, I think every time there is a new one, and as we're recording this, we're just about to install a new one, there is a ceremony whereby, I think it's done in Latin, not many people go to it, but it's done in Latin, where basically the Dean of Westminster tells the Archbishop that they have no jurisdiction here, and they can't do anything like that, and then they all sit down and have a big slap-up dinner. So one of those peculiar traditions which these churches are very good at.
What I'm quite curious to know is, as you say, it's a very, very busy place, lots of recordings going on. When did you have time to practice the organ? I mean, I don't mean you. I mean, when could you practice the organ?
Sometimes it was after 9 o'clock at night. That was the earliest you could get in. You could probably do a little bit at very, very early slots, but then of course that was when the boys' rehearsals were. So it was, you had to work it out that who was going to actually take the probation's rehearsal or the boys' rehearsal, and who was going to go and practice. During the day, you could practice on an 8-foot flute, but what was the point when there were 2,000 tourists going through the building and making all that noise? So there was a little practice organ. In fact, it was Martin's house organ that was moved across to the school and put into a room that we could go and practice there. It wasn't actually a classroom, so that was quite useful. But basically it was only in the evenings, and sometimes it was starting at night.
Did you have a key to Westminster Abbey?
No, we weren't allowed it. I was
going to say,
yes. We there was always a beagle on, who was a 24-hour security, and we had to go through that. And in fact, we couldn't really go on very late into the Abbey because they had to lock it and alarm it at 10:30 or 11. I can't remember exactly what it was. So we never got a huge amount of time. So at a time when it was getting quite busy, or we had recordings to prepare for, or something like that, it could be quite awkward. But you just knew that was the case and you got on with it.
That was one of the nice things at St Paul's. They had 24-hour security, so you could actually go and practice at 2 in the morning if you wanted to. And,
so we did. There was just that restriction with the alarms in the Abbey,
Yeah.
but that was all part of it. It was an amazing experience,
and the school was unusual because it only educated the choristers, didn't it?
Indeed, yeah. So basically, it was 36 boys in the school. There were 10 foundation choristers, and then there were 16 perhaps other choristers. So obviously the foundations were the top years, and then the next were the years below, and then there were probationers. So it was basically 36 choristers, boys in all in the same school. Yeah. And their playground was a covered area at the top on the 8th floor or something like that. It was a very interesting school. We had a lovely headmaster, a chap called Gordon Roland Adams, who was very relaxed with them because he was very musical himself. He'd been director of music at Westminster Under School and knew about choirs and all that. So it was very good having him, having the understanding. Yeah. And of course, for the staff, when they came to the school, they were basically told there will be times when you will have to teach in unsocial hours. Yeah. So if there was a big service, say 11 o'clock in the morning, the boys would be out from 9:30 to lunchtime. But then they would not do evensong. The lay vicars would do evensong, and that would be when they would catch up on their lessons. Yeah. So the staff were told, sometimes you're going to have to teach 5 till 7 in the evening. So, didn't happen that often. That's good, I think. But it's as it should be. As they're given the proper amount of training, and they're not at all hindered by the fact that they're missing out on lessons. Yeah. Yeah. It meant for a very nice sort of family atmosphere to the school, and everybody was living together and all that. I think some obviously felt it was a bit too cloistered, and that actually should be bigger. There should be non-choristers and all that sort of thing, but there wasn't space on the site for it, So, it did mean that we could actually get the boys at almost any time that we needed them.
I mean, that was my experience when I was a chorister at St Paul's in the very early days, that we only had 38 boys in the school. Yeah. And I do remember that I never felt we needed more pupils. I mean, we were all very focused on what we were doing, and then the choir master could come in at any time of day and say, right lads, we've got another rehearsal, and nobody would bat an eyelid. Just how it was.
You were in the new school.
My one claim to fame is that I was the first chorister in the new school. I took my voice trial in Carter Lane with the football pitch on the top.
On the top.
Yep. But I was the first boy in 1967. April the 22nd. Waved on my heart. And the last chorister to be appointed by Sir John Dykes Bower. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. And I always say after that he realised his judgment was flawed. He appointed me and quit.
What was that about? Dross and gloss.
So after the Abbey, your next port of call was Lichfield Cathedral.
Indeed, in Staffordshire. Yeah. And again, a different style of place. Darson Cathedral, but with a bigger school. We had the choir school, the choristers boarded, but the school was 200 odd at that time. It's expanded hugely now. But again, all in the Cathedral Close. And in fact, I think it's only Salisbury and Lichfield are the two completely enclosed closes left. And that was it was a lovely place. When I arrived, the dean, a chap called John Lang, had been very good at sorting the place out a bit because it had been not very well run and it was in deep financial trouble. So he worked very hard to get it back on its feet and done a very, very good job. And then he retired, and Tom Wright, who later became Bishop of Durham, became the dean. And he was very good because Lang was quite controlling and determined it was going this way. Tom was much more relaxed about things. So actually, the first couple of years, it was a bit. Everyone was going, well, how we normally been told what we got to do. And he said, well, do what you think you should do. Get on with it. Which was a very, very lovely, freeing feeling actually. And trusted, absolutely. And we then also had a presenter come along, a chap called Charles Taylor, who was just fantastic. I mean, a wonderful, wonderful man who, with a wonderful sense of humour. The stories are legendary of him. He one service, it was just boys only, actually, and we very rarely did this, and I can't remember why it came out, but we did it, and we did Mendelssohn Lift Thine Eyes as the anthem. Now, I had a very musical head chorister at the time, and so I said, well, why didn't you conduct it? So he said, conduct it, that's fine. I hadn't told Charles that. So when it got to the anthem, I went and sat down. He looked at me to say, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, get on with it. He said, well, the choir will sing the anthem, Mendelssohn Lift Thine Eyes from Elijah, all that. Chord came, it went very, very well. He got to the end and he got up and he said, let us pray. We pray for all those recently made redundant. Which is just a brilliant. And there were legendary ones that he used to just put in. But after I left, the installation of the dean, of a new dean, in the service instructions said that once the dean is in his stalls, he shall wear the slippers of his office. Which is just total nonsense, and he often put these little things in just to see if anybody actually read the instructions, and it was picked up by the dean. He said, "What's all this?" He said, "No, I just put it in for a laugh." Yeah. Except when it got to the installation service, he got to the stalls and there were a pair of slippers. Oh.
And I remember when I was doing an RSCM course at Lichfield on one occasion. And one of them, was he a minor canon? I can't remember.
Yes.
Yeah, was wearing an FRCO hood that he didn't have.
Funny enough, he has got it now. He
has
earned it now, but at those stage he hadn't yet.
Yeah, that's right. And what was it?
It was in the lesson. It was God having the Hebrews say, "You shall not do this. You can't do that. You can't do that." And blah 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 blah. And thou shalt. Oh no, let me get this right. And thou shalt not wear the hood of fellowship. Thou shalt not wear the hood of fellowship that thou art not entitled to wear. Straight out, just like that. And but he was also, I can't speak for two of you. I was not a very good sermon listener at all. But I distinctly remember one which was very, very poignant. The church, I think nowadays it's the Sunday before Advent. Mm-hmm. Has a Sunday that marks road traffic accident victims, and this was the first one. And Charles was preaching at it, and he told this very, very moving story about a young woman whose husband had died in a car accident that was never determined as to how it happened, and talked very generously and warmly about this young lady and how she processed all this information without giving too much away, but because of this. And he finished by saying, "You may be wondering why it is I know so much about this, and he said, I'm very proud that lady is now my wife."
Oh.
And they sat down, and I tell you, we just,
oh my gosh,
every just stunned silence.
Yeah.
And he was very capable of doing that as well. He wasn't just
fantastic.
But he was just such a warm character.
Yeah.
And died a couple of years ago. And miss him very much.
Yeah.
But it was great, and we started doing tours and broadcasts. We had a mad Advent 1997 because Tom Wright was very much a broadcaster as well. The BBC had asked him to do a series of programmes for Advent from Jerusalem, and he said no. He said, "Yeah, I'll do your programmes Advent, but you're coming to Lichfield and doing them from Lichfield." So they did. So we had 4 live Sunday morning services for the 4 Sundays of Advent, which was huge fun to do. It was marvellous. But then we also had Corleen Song on the 23rd of December. A BBC Breakfast had picked up that the television stuff was there, so they came and did BBC Breakfast on the morning of the 23rd, and then Radio 4 did Midnight Mass. So we had this extraordinary
media stars.
Absolutely, and the bank manager was so happy.
Good for the cathedral coffers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a beautiful building. It's always sort of slightly bypassed because there's Lichfield is the birthplace of Samuel Johnson.
Yes.
So it has actually got David Garrick, the actor, but it never seemed to sort of attract many tourists. But if anyone's going, really go because it is a beautiful building.
Its red acoustic is very dry.
Exactly.
Isn't it? Yeah.
The it's red sandstone. And so it just doesn't. There's a bit of acoustic, but you look at the building, you think this is going to have fantastic acoustic, but it's not really. When I first went, I talked to the architect. I said, well, can't we sort of paint some stuff on the pillars that gives it a bit of a harder surface so that actually we could get a better acoustic? He said, yeah. He said, well, the only problem is then after about 5 years, it'll start falling off and it will bring the stonework with it.
Yeah.
So I thought, damn, I've got to think of something else, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the organ there is sharp.
Yes.
It was like Peterborough. Peterborough has been brought back to a normal concert pitch now, but Lichfield was at this what was called Philharmonic pitch, which is about a quarter tone, basically sharp. And it meant that certain pieces were really quite high. And I remember I had a wonderful assistant in Robert Sharp who was just absolutely fantastic. And he agreed to transpose Morellini down a semitone, which is no mean feat, you know, because it was all those sharp keys. Everything feels that bit higher and then all that. And we did it down semitone. And one of the basses came up. He was from Wiltshire, had a little Wiltshire burr in his accent. He said, it's just like seeing an old friend again I hadn't seen in years. Which is a beautiful way of putting it.
It's a glorious instrument.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a really good Black Country full-blooded hill. You know.
I remember doing, in the years when they used to do BBC auditions, if you wanted to do a Radio 3 recital, I did my audition there and unfortunately passed. But I remember what a wonderful instrument it was. Absolutely glorious.
We were lucky to do some work just towards the end of my time. We did a complete rebuild of it. And we actually added a section in the nave because even though in the choir it's pretty full on, in the nave it's incredibly distant. And I invited, we had Harrison's to do the work, and I invited Mark Venning along, who was then the managing director, who was a little bit sceptical about needing to have more pipes in the nave because it is so big. He said, well, come to a big service and just listen. And he came to an ordination, and he came out at the end and said, you're absolutely right, we need to have something up there because the organ, even though it's full pelt, was so far distant that we need something. And it's a 7-stop department, so nothing huge, but just brought and Harrison did brilliant voicing. I remember when they were just finishing the voicing, walking from the choir stalls under the main organ through the crossing into the nave, so you suddenly got the nave coming there. It was seamless. Absolutely seamless. It was just as if the organ that organ was going there. It was fantastic. It was
and of course, you had a very distinguished assistant in Robert Sharp.
Oh yes.
I remember when I was doing this RSCM course, and outside your house there was a flagpole where I think gin was partaken of.
Possibly comment on that.
We called it the organist's drinking pole.
Yes, that's right. Well, it's funny how we always seem to be out there at the end of Evensong when you came out from your house.
Absolutely. Of course, Robert's gone on to.
And Robert's gone doing fantastic,
doing a wonderful job
in York. He was just such a great assistant to have because he was totally reliable, totally there, and we all need. The main thing is that you've got somebody up there you could almost forget about, so that you can focus on the choir and do that, and to be able, and Robert was always there. And he was prone to putting a few little extra notes in psalms and things like that, a little bit of colouring. There go the ships.
Fantastic. And you had a choral society, because I remember writing a piece for you, The Coming of the Kingdom.
That's right, yes, Advent.
An Advent piece.
Yes, the Lichfield Cathedral Special Choir, still going. Made up of lots of worthy locals, which is great fun. I mean, as ever with these groups, as we know, some of the singers are really very competent, some are really not quite so competent, let's put it that way. We had one guy who was actually a farmer in the choir, and in lambing season he was always late, and you could always guarantee you in 10 minutes he'd be fast asleep, because basically of course he'd been up most of the night, at totally random times, and this was the only time he sat down for a week since the last rehearsal. So. But we did some. Paul Spicer wrote a piece for them as well, and we had various people do that, and they tackled them remarkably well.
Was Paul living in the close at that
Paul was, yes, absolutely. He was a great ally. He was director of the Lichfield Festival at the time, and obviously great choral director and a very good organist in his own right. And, so having that extra pair of ears on us was really good, because he was always really generous. He was not afraid to say, actually, I think you need to look at that or do that. But he always did it in a really, everybody really liked, sort of constructive way. We'd always say, that was great, I really love that. have a little think about that,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Not to deflate you in any
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Call that singing. And he, and so that was great, and he was totally supportive of us all. And of course he came from the BBC. He'd got a huge variety of friends and things, which are outside the cathedral world, and that was great because he could bring them in, and the Lichfield Festival was a fantastic event.
Absolutely.
Attracting some big names. We had a wonderful concert once with Thomas Allen and Felicity Lott, and we had a choral scholar scheme which we started when I was there, and they were just oh my goodness, Thomas Allen and Felicity Lott, and so they went to the concert and afterwards met them, and suddenly I think it was Thomas Allen suddenly said to the then dean, he said, "We'll be doing anything at breakfast tomorrow. Can we invite this lot round and we can have a nice chat?" And sure enough, the course was going, "Oh my word," and then sure enough, Deanery, 8:30 the next morning, because Thomas and Felicity were staying there. They sat around for a couple of hours, had a coffee and everything, just chatting to them. And
Brilliant. How
that's
inspiring.
brilliant. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those are amazing stories, really.
How many years were you at?
I did 10 and a half.
Yeah.
And we did one of our regular things was actually to go and sing Christmas carols on the factory floor at Wedgwood. Which was a lovely experience actually. It was quite different again. It was we just one year was a bit difficult because various names were being read out over the tannoy, and that was actually sadly those are people being made redundant. But the rest were really pleased that we were there, because they said this is the sort of joy we really need at this point in time, and that's what all these singers, what our choirs can do, and lift them.
So you've got many happy memories of Lichfield.
Oh yes, they were really really good years, and because of the team we had.
Well, that makes all the difference, doesn't it? If you
Absolutely.
work with a good team of musicians, a good team of clergy, you're away.
And then it starts firing on all cylinders, and then it becomes this vital, vibrant. I hate the phrase powerhouse, but you know what I mean. That sort of, and actually, I always kept on saying to everybody, anything you do in the cathedral, you've got to do it the best. No matter what, because you want to say, okay, you want to go to a compliment, go to the cathedral, go and see them because they do it really well. Do a rave in the nave, not that I've ever been to one, but go there because Winchester do it, or literally wherever does it really, really well. And that I think is one of the things the cathedrals really should be leading its way with.
And everybody has to be singing from the same hymn sheet.
Exactly.
Clergy, musicians, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And because if it doesn't, you're going around in circles, and it doesn't fulfill its potential, which is really important.
So then, after 12 and a half years,
10 and a half.
10 and a half, sorry, you came down here.
Came down to sunny Winchester.
Winchester.
I did 22 years here. So, which is
not a bad innings.
Which is not a bad innings, I think. They say you get less for murder, but that's another matter.
And I think probably that's for our next programme.
That would be very good.
If that's okay. But
absolutely.
It's been absolute joy once again, Andy.
Indeed.
Lovely to talk. Lovely to see you both. I love these conversations.
It's great.
It's great.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Look forward to the next one.
Thank you very much.